So I think that project-based learning can be done with adult learners, and it's a really good idea to do it with them. And right now, I'm working with my classes intensively every day for 1.5 hours every day. Well, not right now exactly, you know. But generally, the idea is that we have a lot of time to work on that every day. And I know there are a lot of limitations. So in many schools, there might be a lot of restrictions to do that. But if you have the opportunity to try project-based learning as a teacher, is a great idea. And what I will tell you today is first, how I was led towards project-based learning. I'll give you a few characteristics and a few practical ideas that you can use to do it in your classroom. I have a question for you first, and you can type your answer in the chat box. How often do you feel this stagnation because you have been using the same course book again and again, and you have to see the same material all day long? If you have this feeling, you can type yes. Okay, so I've had it a lot actually, and I see here the chat, a lot of people. So in order to try and avoid this feeling, I first started slowly, maybe adapting the book a little bit, replacing materials, creating my own materials, and it really made me feel better. My students really appreciate it. So then I went on to doing small projects, mostly after we had finished a unit in order to revise. And then slowly I went towards longer projects. Now, I didn't know what I was doing at that time. So when I was asked to participate in a school event to talk about creative ideas, I did a bit of research. And I realized that I was actually doing project-based learning. I was so proud of myself to do that. So I'll tell you what exactly I was doing and what I realized I was doing. I was encouraging student ownership because the students had to negotiate the topic and they had to choose the details with their groups. It was extended over a period of time. Usually, you will see later that I always do 1 week project so far because I think it's more manageable, but it's a good idea to extend it if possible. I was integrating different skills. They had to use mediation skills, listening, speaking, reading, and writing every day. And then, of course, they had to learn the language and the content. The learning was in this context. And it is amazing how much vocabulary and grammar discussion came up during the projects. They had to work individually and collaboratively. And of course, it was a really nice atmosphere to see students actually taking responsibility for their own learning and, well, actually ignoring me at some point. And a very important part was that they had time in all their projects to actually do peer correction and take a look at comments from me, from their classmates, and go back and review, and in the end, give us a final project. And in my view, more or less, PBL is this cycle that has to do with investigation, experience, critical thinking, problem solving, and production. And there are a few different definitions about project-based learning, but for me, this is the main idea, and this is what I try to follow in my classes. So I will give you a more concrete example, which you can also use in your classroom, and how we actually implemented all the characteristics mentioned before. So this was a 15 student classroom B2 level. And I actually replaced a unit on travel with a project. And what the students were asked were to create a travel guide. So this was their problem, recommend a country that they wanted to visit, and they had to present their research to the classroom. So first, they started by negotiating as groups, deciding on the destination, and they assigned roles to each other on what research material every person should focus on. They did research by reading and listening to useful materials online. They had their devices with them, so I asked them if they have laptops or tablets to bring them in the classroom. If not, they could use their phones. Most of them are used to doing that anyway. And they noticed a lot of language and focused on new vocabulary. For example, it is amazing how much new vocabulary came up. And there was a lot of grammar related to conditionals and imperatives that came up. And I had my expectations, of course, as a teacher, but many more things were discussed during that project. So it was kind of clear for me, to my students, that they were learning new things. Then they negotiated the ideas they had researched, and they had, of course, to think critically in order to select the information that they would use in their final presentation, because there was so much information online. And they took notes based on their research. They formed lists. They made a first draft, which went through peer correction, comments from their group, from their teacher, and received feedback. So in the end, they reflected on their work, they reviewed, and they prepared the presentation. And now when you see it as a list, it seems a bit dull, but when you see the class atmosphere, it was really amazing. The students were very excited. And of course, there is always the one student who might not be interested, but most of them were really into it. And they went at great lengths. Some of them even cooked food and brought samples for us to taste. So for 1.5 hours every day, they were just doing that, and they really loved it. And I have a few more ideas, though. This is just one way to do it. Like in the future, I'm already planning to do the same project, another class, but bring it out to the local community, ask them to find information about sites in Dublin. And they will have to go and visit tour agents and get information, and then make videos in front of these sites, talking about the history, etc., and then upload them to our school's website. So it becomes really public this time. And a few more ideas about things I've already tried. I will show you just some pictures. This is from a project I did with my students on controversial ads. Again, the process was more or less the same. And the groups had to find controversial advertisements, analyze the controversy, and of course, bring in extra material, their own opinion. And in the end, we didn't have a presentation, but we have an exhibition, like a gallery exhibition. So you can see all their writings are on the walls, and we had music playing at the background. So it was a really nice opportunity, and they felt that their work was really seen by their classmates. They had time to chat about each other's work. So it was very satisfying. And another one was a literary project, literature project, where they had to work on a short story. Now, this time I chose the short story, but in other projects, they can pick their own individual stories from a collection I have. And again, we could hear the audio. They had to read on their own. They had questions on how this story actually can refer to social situations or social problems. They had to do extra research online in order to enhance their perspectives and their ideas. And in the end, here the product was individual. So the process was collective, but the product was individual. They had to write something inspired from their research and from the notes that they had been taking all week. Some of them chose to write a character analysis. Others chose to write a social problem analysis in relation to the story, and others went more creatively and wrote their own story inspired from that. So I think that overall it was a really, really good opportunity for them to produce something. And what were the reactions I got from my students? Most of them, as I told you before, were really excited to do that. They felt like they needed a break from the usual course book material. They felt really creative, and it was a good opportunity for them as well to try and find out something more about themselves, to explore their skills. So what I find out after all was that I started doing project-based learning on a very selfish, let's say, background. I wanted to do something more to get out of my stagnation. But after seeing my students working so hard and becoming autonomous, and after seeing them being so organized and creative, in the end, I felt more proud about my students than about me discovering project-based learning. So I would really recommend to everyone to do that on their own. And I know that it's difficult sometimes to, Gabi's on my screen, okay, I'm almost done. So I know that sometimes it's difficult to actually go straight to project-based learning. So what I suggest is taking baby steps like I did. Start, if you're not doing it by adapting, maybe start with doing smaller projects and then go to project learning, which again, maybe you can do to break the routine.